today, I'm very excited to announce to you that in October, we are starting a Hope UC Nashville. Hey everybody, I'm excited today to tell you really the story of how we became Hope UC Nashville. And it's really important to go through this story with you because you have to take sometimes a look back at where you've been to know where you're going. And you can see the hand of God leading you through stories. And what I love about Hope UC Nashville is even you listening right now, all of you have a story. It's one of my favorite things to sit at a table and listen to somebody tell their story, and you can hear the history. And sometimes it's through pain, sometimes it's through victory, sometimes it's through loss. But the powerful thing about it is all of it leads us up to being able to be together in this room right now. And it's an amazing thing to experience when you hear the stories and you start to see things put together, because some of us, I remember times in my life where it's like, I don't know if we're going to make it. I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. I don't know financially and all this kind of stuff. And Hope UC Nashville has that story itself, and you get to be a part of that because someday in the future, we're going to be telling stories about what happened today. And so history will be very important later. So I think it's good for you to know history now. You know, Hope UC overall is actually started in Australia with pastors Mark and Darlene Check. Some of you know the name Darlene Check. She wrote a song called Shout to the Lord, a little tiny song called Shout to the Lord. It's one of the most sung songs over the last probably 25 years. And they were pastors at Hillsong Church a long time ago. And they, 10 years ago, they started Hope UC in Australia, the Hope Unlimited Church. And they wanted to do something that was unlimited hope. That's who they are. And they wanted to do something that was community driven. And they had been asked to take over a small church and had decided this is something we want to do. And now this is a global movement. Hope UC is not just limited to Nashville. It's not just limited to Australia. They actually have 6 campuses in Australia. They have campuses in India, which James and I, our worship pastor, has been able to go to and be a part of that. And then here in America, we actually have Hope UC America, which involves Los Angeles, Santa Fe, and Nashville. More probably to come, but that's what we have as of right now. And so, when we moved to Nashville, we were not planning on starting a church, being a part of any kind of necessarily, pastoring any kind of church in the area or anything like that. We actually came just to serve Nashville and to travel and do ministry. We've been worship leading in Kansas City for about 15 years. And I say we because when I moved here from Kansas City and we left the church there, we left actually because I felt God tell me I have too many kids with guitars and not enough shepherds. Would you get off a stage and raise some up? So we just wanted to raise up worship leaders. We wanted to challenge worship teams. We wanted to see God do something through the avenue of worship, and we really believe God wants to do something. And I've been a songwriter for a long time. James has been a songwriter. Our team had been traveling internationally doing ministry. And so when we moved to Nashville, there were about 7 families that moved from Kansas City to Nashville. And we came and we just started ministering outside of Nashville. We'd travel around all over the U.S. and then we'd come back and we would do things here. We were all involved in a local church just because we believe in the local church. So we never left the church per se, but we weren't pastoring in it or ministering in it. We just wanted to attend it because we knew being a part of a church is very important to us. So we were a part of a church, but we were here ministering, and we started a ministry called Here Be Lions. And Here Be Lions was really our band name. It was a ministry name, and it had us actually traveling and doing different ministries. We started a ministry called Be Fierce that was for men. We started a ministry called Healing is Right, which is still active today. You can find it on an app, and it's just writing songs for healing. We were part of a ministry called All About Worship. And so we were doing all kinds of things for ministry, but we weren't doing a local church. And during that time, we rented a house not far from Homestead. That's it's actually out on Bethesda Road. Some of you might know where that's at. And it was an old bunny farm. And when I found this house, actually, we were looking for a place just to put our offices and to be able to hang out. And we found a place on this bunny farm. They actually had 20,000 rabbits at one time. I'm not going to tell you what it was for, but I had nothing to do with that. So just know that that was pre Here Be Lions. So the lions did not eat the rabbits. So we ask like, hey, they have like 6 houses on this almost 80 acres, and they were like, we want to, we told them like one of the houses was available, and we said, would you mind if we put ministry in here and be able to run a ministry out of this? And they were like, oh, we love that. And it was awesome because there was parking. There was a little bunny barn across from it, which you'll hear that phrase every so often, and it seems like an inside joke, but it's not. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. And there was a little bunny barn, but it still had 300 rabbits in it, and they were prized rabbits that this guy traveled around and won tons of trophies for. Jay and Myrtle owned the property. So we were in this house, and we actually set up shop in there, and we would do podcasts from there. We would do ministry from there. We actually started doing worship nights in the front room, and we'd have 30, 40 people show up, and we'd worship together. It's just friends from around the area. And through that process, the bunny barn, actually, the guy ended up selling his rabbits, and the bunny barn that had been just rabbits for over 20 years, which was a pretty nasty barn. I went in it and I was like, I wonder if we could turn this into a worship area. And I brought my wife over to look at it, and she said, absolutely not. This is disgusting. So I brought I brought some of the band guys over. I said, what do you guys think? And I remember Jeremy James are like, oh, I think this could probably work, So I was like, all right, there's a little bit of hope there. So I went to my stepdad who does construction. I said, hey, do you think you could turn this thing into an awesome place for us to worship? He's like, absolutely. I was like, that's all I need. I just need, we're to agree on one thing. And there was an agreement. So we went after this, and he turned this place into a beautiful place for us to worship. And we started having worship nights. We had some friends who did worship nights, and we just started making friends all over Nashville that would just come together, and we'd feed everybody, we'd hang out, and we'd worship. Well, in the meantime, we're still traveling, and I traveled out to Australia to actually write with a church called City of Light, and we were doing some songwriting for them. And I got a chance to meet Darlene and Mark Check. And when I went to their church, they were actually having a prayer night, and they asked me if I wanted to be involved. And I got up, ended up praying, and we could just feel an instant connection. So I spoke at their conference they were having that weekend, and just on songwriting, and they asked me would I come back the next year to speak at their conference. And so the next year, my whole family flew out to Australia, and while we were out there, I had a chance to speak at their church. And as we were speaking, I could feel something changing in me. And I remember even messaging our team back here, like, I feel God's doing something in me. I had no clue what it was, but I could feel something shifting, and God saying like, hey, the winds of change are coming. Something's coming, and you need to be ready for it, and you need to be aware of it. And so during that time, I heard Pastor Mark say something. He gathered all of their staff together, and because we were one of the special speakers, we were allowed to be in the room. And we were in there, and there were probably 100 different staff members from all these different churches there. And he said something really powerful that sticks with me today. He said, wars are lost because men in offices stop listening to men in the field. And he said, we will always be field driven, head office supported. And he said, for all of our pastors of our churches, you know your city, you know your area. And so you just need to let us know how we can support you, how we can, champion you in your city, because you know that ground and how to take that ground. And we trust that you are digging into what God is doing in that city. Well, I remember looking at Gina and I was like, that to me is who I want to be. I want to be that guy. I don't want to be a guy who's like always dictating everything to everybody. I want to be a guy who champions other people in their area of ministry, in other churches. I was like, and I'd work for a guy like that. Like, I'd love to serve a guy like that. So we come back to Nashville, and a couple minutes later, I get a call, and Mark and Darlene Check asked if, what do you think about I Hope You See Nashville? And I was like, oh yeah, I'd attend that church, And they're like, no, we don't want you to attend it. We want you to pastor it, And I was like, oh man. And at that time we were having great worship nights. We were having, 100 people out to the Bunny Barn where we'd get to worship together and we just eat together. And it was family. And I told, Mark and Darlene, I'd love to do this, but I'm a little concerned because I really want to I want to have a family. I don't want to lose worship nights. And I still feel like we're supposed to travel some and minister out some. And Darlene said something that I think is really important for you to know because this is the heart of our church. She said, good. I think you should still travel some. I think you should still do some other things. That way you'll never build the church on you. And I want you to know, that's what Mark and Darlene, they were already pastoring in that way, and I got to see that. They love community. They want to see families restored, and they don't want a church built on a personality. They don't want it built on them. And I don't want this ministry built on Dustin. What makes this ministry move and do and be is actually the people who are a part of it, who are actually other pastors and leaders that are equipping each other to do a work. And that was initiated for me, as we moved into Nashville, by not just starting a church, but by getting around other friends and champion each other. So this is a place that loves to champion other people. And so in that process, I talked to the team and we decided we're going to start this. And we started in the Bunny Barn over 3 years ago at this point. And it's continued to grow. The first service, we were packed and we were like, well, it's a first service for a church, so that's common and it'll die down. And it didn't. It just kept growing. So we knew we had to build something. We worked on trying to buy some land somewhere else and it did not happen. And I had a friend in the middle of COVID, one of the guys at our church came to me and he said, hey, do you know that Homestead Manor is for sale? Well, that day I had about 5 or 6 people message me about Homestead and they said, do you know Homestead's for sale? And I was like, yeah, I know it's for sale, but what does that mean? And this person said to me, he said, hey, I think you should go check it out. I think this is everything you've been talking about. You've been talking about a larger barn, and you wanted to have a church still in a barn, and this has a barn. It also has some other facilities and some things we can do. So just a couple years ago, in the middle of COVID, we came over to Homestead and walked it. And when we walked this property, we knew this is what we're supposed to do. We had prophetic words. I had a lady in our lives who we've known for a really long time come in and she had seen a vision of us owning a barn. And when she drove up, she said there was water pouring out of every hole in the barn. And people from every direction, north, south, east, and west, were walking into this barn, refreshed by the water pouring out of it. And she said, God, what is that water? And he said, that's healing for the nations. And so we started believing for that God was going to create a place that would be healing for the nations. Before we even attached to Australia, before we even attached to India, before we even knew this stuff was going to be happening, we had already had that dream in our heart. So when my wife and I walked this property, we knew this is it. And through that process, we didn't have any money at the time. It's a miracle story. It's a long story. It's a miracle story of how God gave us the property. It was in the middle of COVID. We were still having church services. We were actually growing as a church online, and God was still doing powerful things. We went to the bank, asked them how much, what this would take, and they said, well, we need $1 million in 40 days. And they said, how much do you have? And we said, we have 40 days. That's all we have, And so in 40 days, $1 million came in. Almost exactly $1 million. And I think this is part of the story of Hope You See that's important for you, because I believe God is calling some of you even into things. It's why you're in the room right now. He's calling you into things, saying, this is something that I'm actually placing you in the middle of something because I've created dreams in you and I want to resource you at that level, but you have to be in right position. You have to have some healing in your heart. There's certain things that have to be in order. And I believe what was happening for us was all the people who are coming together were like puzzle pieces. And when the puzzle pieces came together, God says, now I can resource you at that level. Because you wouldn't have known what to do with it otherwise, right? If I would have had $1 million a year ago, I would have put it into something else that I'd probably be still sitting on waiting to try to build. And here God says, I'm going to bless you with the gym right in the center of a city where I'm going to have you affect change. Thompson Station. So in that process, we raised $1 million in 40 days. We ended up getting the property. And since we've had the property, it has been an incredible explosion of growth, because what we're praying for is not just a building where people meet on Sundays. We wanted a property that people would be on all week long. So to do that, we started something that you'll hear about called Avoda. It's our business. It's the business side, the for-profit side of Here Be Lions. And the for-profit side actually runs our coffee shop called 1819 Coffee. It actually runs Homestead Manor, and it runs our barn, which is an event barn where we have weddings, we have concerts, we have all kinds of recordings and stuff like that. And some people would say, well, that's like the secular and the sacred kind of thing. We're doing a sacred thing and the secular thing. But actually, I believe believe there's no division between those two. I think everything you put your hand to needs to honor God. So when we work, that's the word avoda. The word avoda means to work, serve, and worship are all the same word. So when we work, we worship. That is worship. When we work with excellence, when we give glory and honor to God in our finances, when we serve people in our community, when we serve each other, that actually reveals an attitude of worship, revealing His worth. And when we reveal His worth, it causes our work and our service to be able to grow because we're reestablishing the boundaries of who is a priority in our life. And we put Him as top priority in our life in every area. So avoda actually helps run this property. And so it's amazing to see what God is doing. It's obvious that we're exploding as a church. You know, we only want to do one service. I don't want to go to 2 services because I want a family. I don't want to just build what we'd say just a church. It's like, no, this is the church that is a family of families. We come together to be together. And it's powerful because as we commune together, communion means common union. What is the common union in this? This is Jesus and His people being able to see the kingdom of God activated in the earth. And we do that in Hope UC through 4 core values that we're going to be talking about in the future. One is we're talking about the Word is our foundation. Worship is our honor. Community is our heartbeat, and His presence is our passion. And those are the 4 core values that drive Hope UC and its story. And I'm very excited that now you get to be a part of this story, even if it's just for today. Maybe it just inspires you for today. Maybe this is a place you're supposed to make your home. But I just pray for you on the journey that God continues to help you write the story that gives Him glory and honor. And that's what we as Hope UC want to be, and we want to do too.